Welcome to Cost of Living Abroad. My guest today is Ryan Mellon, the host of Digital Nomad Nation. I was on his show last week and now having him on here today. So he's going to tell us about his entire experience traveling the world, how he affords and is able to live in Bali half of the year. I don't want to give a spoiler for the audience. So do you live in one of your rental houses? What's your living situation like now in Virginia?
I've been living on my sailboat ever since I became a nomad. I always thought it'd be cool to live on a sailboat. I've always been a little bit of a minimalist. And this is a sweet one bedroom apartment on the water, like in Virginia. That's gonna be like, I don't know, a third of the price of what a one bedroom apartment on the water would cost here in rent. Maybe a quarter of the price. You know, considering like my monthly slip fees and insurance and stuff.
What
But
I'm curious. What is it? What's your what's your slip fee? What's your insurance? Do you own the boat
yeah,
outright?
I
Yeah.
pay cash for the boat. I got a good deal on the boat, and my slip fee is $340 a month. My power bill is anywhere from like $50 to $100 a month, and my insurance is about $70 a month. That's
So
my
it's under
cost.
you're
It's
living
it's like
under
five
five
hundred
hundred
dollars
dollars. Yeah.
a month.
That's
Yeah, I
awesome.
mean, and I don't have to mow grass, right? But it's a boat. I'm always fixing stuff, and like that never ends. There's always boat maintenance, and you got to really enjoy that, and you need to be handy and be able to fix some things yourself. If you got to hire that stuff out, it's not going to be worth it because it gets expensive quick. But yeah, and I can move it, I can sail it, I can take it, um, you know, anywhere. I'm not ready for the Bahamas yet. I want some solar panels and a water maker and stuff like that. So down the road, that's going to be the case. But to answer your other question, um, what's it look like in the future? I spent last winter 6 months in Bali. That was my first time staying in one place for 6 months. And even when I was in Bali, I bounced around to a bunch of places because I was like, I gotta find the right place. And I did look at buying some real estate there. So I think somewhere in that region, I might buy a property there one eventually, and then continue to stay on the boat when I'm home. And so I think the future looks like a villa in Bali and maybe a villa somewhere else, and then the boat in the States, and I kind of just bounce around.
If you could get your sailboat over here and be able to sail around the Philippines, wow. Or the other islands, property on Lombok, just like big plots of
Yeah,
land, freehold
yeah,
land you can buy for 30 years to build on, and just
I think
like
it's
stunning surf break, gorgeous beaches, like untouched, remote. They were
yeah,
20,000 US dollars.
it's crazy. And Indonesia has 17,000 islands, so like it's slowly expanding. You got the Gili Islands right off the coast. You got Nusa Penida and Nusa Lembongan, which have the famous beaches like that you see like online that everyone thinks that are in Bali. And then Lombok, yeah, I think it's going to be the next Bali as far as, there's a lot of untouched nature there. It's fairly close. They do have an airport. And yeah, the place I was looking at, a one bedroom that was new construction, but someone had owned it for 1 year, so slightly used, with a shared pool, one bedroom, fully furnished in Uluwatu, 5 minutes from one of the smaller beaches, was 125,000 for a 23-year leasehold. And then you could get an additional 10 years for about $8,000.
Hmm.
So in Bali, you can't own real estate outright unless you have an Indonesian on the on the deed or the title, or you have this complicated process of owning a business in Indonesia, and then all the money needs to stay in Indonesia. It gets complicated. So that really leaves the power of what gets sold and to foreigners with the locals, which I think is great. Because if it was where you could come in and buy it outright, the whole place would just not even be Bali anymore. It would just be like skyscrapers, and it
It'd
would
be
be very,
Sihanoukville, Cambodia. Have you been to
it'd be,
Sihanoukville,
yeah.
Cambodia?
I haven't, but
Don't go.
I've seen it. Yeah,
Pass.
it would be completely
Yeah.
ruined. So,
Mhm.
but there's good deals to be had in Bali still.
No guy. He's actually here right now, but him and his family, his wife is Indonesian, and they're property developers there. They buy and build, and they do well. What do you think is the biggest misconception people back home have about your life and the lifestyle you live?
People just assume that I have a ton of money, um, just because I'm constantly traveling all over the place and like beautiful places and living in these places. But and I'm not doing bad. I'm not gonna lie, but it's not also not. It's not like you need a ton of money to do what I'm doing, right? And like I've also been very creative over the years with travel hacking, and like flying with points and miles, like all over the world, not paying for any flights. So if you can teleport to somewhere without even any cost, pretty much, and then the place is half the price of where you're living, it's a no-brainer. But I think a
Okay.
lot of people just think that, it costs a ton of money and that you're rich. I think a lot of people think that just digital nomads are making tons of money, and it's really not the case.
We've already been over the math, but yeah, you certainly don't have to be rich to live a $2,000 a month lifestyle. When I thought I'm going to retire early because I don't feel like getting another job, it was pretty simple. I was like, okay, I just need to make 1,200 a month online.
It's an eye opener. Like people hearing this are like, "What?" Like that's probably more than their rent out
Yeah,
in
for
North
sure.
America. Way more expensive than where I am. So
Mhm.
it's crazy.
What is the setting off point or the catalyst for you to be a digital nomad? And
7 years ago, I was working two jobs, 14 hours a day, 6 days a week, and I realized that that was for the birds, and it was terrible, and I was just like completely burnt out. So I did that from all of my 20s for a decade. I worked two jobs, and so I was watching some video bloggers and reading Nomadic Matt's blog, and I read the 4 Hour Work Week, and then I read Vagabonding, and that all just completely opened my mind to like getting out there and travel. And so while I still have my two jobs, I managed to get 2 weeks off at the same time at both jobs, which took an incredible amount of negotiation. In the US, we get a very little amount of vacation, and they never want you to take it back to back. So I got 2 weeks off. I flew to Costa Rica by myself, stayed in a hostel in San Jose, never been in a hostel in my life, didn't speak any Spanish, knew no one, and I did Costa Rica for 2 weeks, and I was like climbing volcanoes and swimming in crater lakes and jump lining through or zip lining through jungles and hitting both coasts of the beaches there, both Pacific and the Caribbean, and just met some amazing people. I met people that had been traveling for years, and that kind of blew my mind when I met some of those folks. I didn't even know that was a possibility, right? I'm on these 2 weeks to get out of my two prisons that I had at work back at home. And so I came back from my vacation, not like refreshed and ready to go back to work. But I came back like I really got to make some major changes in my life. Like I want to travel more. Like I can't just only do 1 or 2 weeks here and there. It's much more expensive when you just go for short periods than longer periods, as I was to find out later. So as the story goes along, I was having drinks with friends, as all great ideas come up with drinks with friends. And they were like, when we retire, we want to do a road trip of the U.S. 23, or we want to do as many states as we can over 1 year, like in an RV. And I'm like, well, why are we waiting? Why would you wait till you retire? Like, I'm still having this high coming off this trip. I'm like, let's do this. I'm totally down. I'll go with you, and like let's save up enough money for 1 year so that we don't have to work. We'll find an RV, we'll quit our jobs, and we'll just figure it out when we get back. Get our jobs back, get new jobs, whatever. Doesn't matter. We were like rented out our houses, we gave our cars to friends and family. We saved up enough money so we didn't have to work. And so we did that 1 year road trip, and we did 23 states in that 1 year, and it was an absolutely epic experience. But like 6 months into it, I started to realize, like, man, this thing's coming to an end pretty quick, and I'm gonna have to go back to my old jobs, working two jobs. I don't know. I really don't even know. And then I reached out to a good friend who is a real estate investor. She was buying a lot of houses, flipping houses and buying rentals. And I also had my real estate license. So not only was I working two jobs, I was also dabbling a little bit in real estate with my two jobs. And I called her and I said, can I help you find some deals while I'm traveling? And she's like, absolutely. I don't care where you are. Like, if you can help me find deals, that's great. So I ended up building a system where I was able to just blast out offers all over the place while I'm in the RV out of my state for my friend who's in Virginia. And we ended up doing like 20 to 25 deals in those last 6 months of me on the road. And then I got home and I realized, like, wow, I'm fully remote. Like, I'm a digital nomad. It wasn't even a word back then. This is like now, end of 2018, beginning of 2019. I'm like, I don't have to go back to my jobs. And so I was home for maybe like a couple weeks or a month or so, stayed with some family, kept left my house being rented out. And then I jumped on a plane and I went to New Zealand. And then I did 8 countries in 6 months, and that was 2019. And then I've been coming home every summer since for 6 months and traveling um, every winter for the past 7 years.
Beautiful. Wow. So it was a real life-changing moment. That first time you went away for 2 weeks, you kind of never looked back after that. I'm really curious about the idea that you sort of accidentally started working remote. So can we dig into that a little bit? Like, just break down
Sure,
for me. I don't know a ton about the real estate market, and I'm sure lots of audience members are curious about that. But what was this process that you were doing in the RV,
sure.
that was working, or that turned into something real and profitable?
Yeah, so I was a real estate agent working for a broker. And you think of a typical real estate agent of actually being in person, taking people to go look at houses, writing offers, delivering them to the sellers in person and all that. But what we were focused on was buying houses that were strictly in distress. So like bank owned properties, repossessed, foreclosed properties. And at that time, everything was starting to become digital, where I could send everything off for digital signatures. Sometimes we needed like a real signature, but it could be scanned and sent through. So we managed to work it so that I was just finding the deals. Then I had another agent in my office who was helping out and was getting a cut of the proceeds to the sales. And so she would go and actually videotape the house from top to bottom so that my client could watch it on YouTube and I could check it out. And then we would do the basic math of how much money we thought it needed in renovations. Because I had seen her, she kind of taught us how to do that. And then we would just start blasting off offers to the banks and everyone. And then my client would only ever look at this stuff until we had it under contract. And then she would go through and look at it, and it was usually a good enough deal that she would 95% of the time buy the properties that we got under contract for her. So that's kind of how that worked. But mainly doing paperwork, finding the stuff online, having someone to go out and videotape it, and then sending the contracts for digital signatures, and then just waiting that process out till closing. Closing comes, and then I would have them direct deposit my commission check from my broker into my bank account.
Beautiful, man. I think that's an interesting story as well because there's so many people who are probably doing a job that they could do remotely or at least like 80% remotely. And I think there was, the sort of leaving the office thing in COVID opened a lot of people's eyes. But the reality was a big part of Tim Ferriss in the 4 Hour Work Week, he was not telling people to like quit. He wasn't telling people to like, do fire and like save up a number and never work again. That book is like a blue plan essentially to do what you did, right? To be like, this is how you turn your office job into a job where you can be remote, where you don't have to be responsible. And again, yeah, before those words, right? Before digital nomad, before um, you know, remote or sort of location independent work. That's super cool, man. So after New Zealand, how did you shift to Southeast Asia and
New Zealand, Australia, Bali, um, Thailand, Singapore, Malaysia, I think China, and then I ended up in Cuba. So all over the place. But yeah, New Zealand was amazing. My only complaint is it's expensive to be there, right? You know, it's a beautiful place, but it's not like one of those geo arbitrage places where you go and live and it's cheaper. It's quite expensive. It was an amazing trip. Um, when I got to Bali, I really fell in love with the culture and the naturalness of the island, having the jungle and the beaches both, and you have volcanoes um, and then the culture is very cool there. And then the cost, just kind of seeing how much less it costs to be there and live there and travel there than what I'm used to at home, um, was a real big game changer. And I think you have this, it's similar in most of Southeast Asia. It's significantly less, right? I
yeah.
think Bali has gotten more expensive over the years. It's one of the higher end places compared to like, especially like Vietnam and some parts of Thailand. But it's still cheaper than me being at home for sure.
Yeah, so let's get into some of the numbers. Let's break down if you could your sort of monthly costs, monthly expenses in
Mhm.
Virginia when you're living a sort of more traditional lifestyle, right? Your food, your groceries, your rent, your cable bill, your phone bill, all that, all those basics.
Yeah, cost per month, living here is gonna be easily three to $4,000 on, if you're still being on top of it and you're renting a reasonable place, I would say per month. And in Bali, it can be anywhere from, if you're in the mid range, I would say, not like backpacker trying to be as cheap as possible, but not, you don't need a private pool, but you do want a private villa. Um, Maybe like $2,000 a month. Um, approximately. And I would say that that's your rent, that's your transportation, having a scooter if you want, or just taking Gojek or Grabs around. Food is very inexpensive as far as meals, a couple dollars a meal, $3 to $5 per meal at a restaurant. Groceries and food is, just maybe $150 a month on that. And usually I just cook breakfast and I pretty much eat out the rest of the time.
If objectively the costs in Bali are probably half, roughly 50%, maybe 60% for some, or if you're coming from somewhere like New York or San Francisco, they're probably
For
20 or 30%, right? Like they're
yeah.
probably a fraction. But I think one of the things that I'm really interested in is how that shift in cost of living or geo arbitrage affects your quality of life. So like what does it feel like to you? Like that first time you spent, months or like a real long-term stay in Bali, how did it affect you? How did you feel psychologically?